I think so. I'm not sure if we're streaming to YouTube or not, but I think we're just going to proceed with Facebook. All right. I've been going insane because it's like the same things I've been doing every day for, almost 2 years. And then some days it works and some days it doesn't. But I think I've got a handle on what the issue is. Okay, we're on YouTube as well. Thank you so much for being patient with me. I appreciate it. I'm just, in terms of tech support, a little bit of a one-man band here, but I think I've got a handle on it. And so tomorrow I'll be making some adjustments I think will work. So it looks like we're streaming. Audio good. Let me know if audio is good. I'm hoping that it is. I don't think we're getting feedback. Nancy in North Carolina. Christo tells me I'm live on YouTube. Thank you very much. Paul in the Great Northwest. Liz says hello. Annie in Michigan. James in Indianapolis. Bill in Missouri. All right. Things are happening. Tom giving me a thumbs up. I'm hoping that's for the audio. How about we learn a little Talmud? Of all nights, for this to have all these problems, I needed to make it a short show tonight anyway, because we're invited to dinner in our friend's sukkah. I think Nina and my son are going to have to go on ahead, and I will join them just a few minutes late. Okay, so I'm going to just keep things moving. Thank you for being patient with me. It seems like everything is working now. Okay, today's episode of AT Daily is sponsored by Neil Green, who says, thank you, Sal and Nina, for helping to make 5781, last year, the Hebrew year, for helping to make 5781 so meaningful. Gemar Chatima Tova, may you be inscribed and sealed for a good year. To you and the AT community at large. Amen, Neil in Virginia. And may you and all... in Virginia, yes. May you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings in 5782, and we say amen. Okay, let's get into it. Big day. We're on page 23 here in Tractate Beitzah, the 8th volume of the Talmud. These are the laws of festivals. Today we're going to do 3 Mishnas, very short Mishnas, and we're going to complete our journey through chapter 2 of Tractate Beitzah. And tomorrow, hopefully with a new system in place, we will open chapter 3. All right, let's light up the darkness. Yes. Okay. So where are we? We're at 23, the A side of page 23, and we're completing Mishna number 6 that we opened yesterday. Recall that we learned that Rabban Gamliel, the Nasi, the head of the Sanhedrin, in their household, they had 3 stringencies. That was Mishna number 5. 3 stringencies that were more stringent than what the law required because they were following Beis Shammai, who are generally more stringent than Beis Hillel on those 3 matters. And then Mishnah 6, they had 3 leniencies. Okay, so they're not so good, but they were only leniencies with respect to their own household, even though Rabban Gamliel, had great authority over the religious life of the whole, Jewish community in Israel. At the time, the leniencies that mentioned yesterday were only in his own household. The third of those was that on Passover, even after the temple had already been destroyed, nevertheless, on Passover, they would roast a whole goat with its entrails about his head. We learned in Tractate Pesachim that was the way that a goat or a lamb was roasted on the night of Passover when the temple was standing. It would be slaughtered in the temple, in the temple grounds, in the courtyards of the temple, then taken out of the temple, and there would be a group of people gathered basically around the campsite where they would roast that whole goat or a lamb, and then they would eat it together, a group that had agreed to do so in advance. And that had to be roasted whole as the Torah commands. Once the temple was destroyed, we could no longer bring the paschal offering, the paschal lamb. And so the sages decreed that we should not roast a lamb in the same manner that it had been roasted when the temple was standing, because it might appear to people that you were eating consecrated meat outside of the temple environs. In other words, as a commemoration of the tragedy of the destruction of the temple, the sages said, that's it, we don't roast a whole lamb. But Rabban Gamliel's house was still doing that. It is taught in the Mishna that one of Rabban Gamliel's 3 leniencies was that one may prepare a whole kid goat, meaning a goat roasted whole with its entrails over its head on the night of Passover. It is taught in a Beitzah in this regard that Rabbi Yosef says, Theodosius of Rome, leader of the Jewish community there in Rome, right? It's the Roman Empire that destroyed the Second Temple, but there was already an expatriate Jewish community living in the city of Rome. So the leader of the Jewish community there in Rome, Theodosius, instituted the custom for Roman Jews to eat whole kids on the night of Passover in commemoration of the practice that was followed in the temple. And the sages sent a message to him, were you not Theodosius, a very important person, we would have decreed excommunication upon you, as you are feeding the Jewish people consecrated food, which may be eaten only in and around the temple itself. And you're doing that outside the temple, thousands of miles away from the temple. And the Gemara expresses surprise. Can it enter your mind that the sages really meant that Theodosius was feeding the Jewish people consecrated food outside the temple? Excuse me. These goats are certainly not consecrated animals. There was no more consecration because the temple was gone. You couldn't consecrate an animal to be brought as an offering. But rather say that he was feeding the Jewish people something similar to consecrated food, which people might mistake for a paschal offering. Everyone needed to know, especially the simple Jews who might get confused when one of their leaders was having a goat roasted whole. Everybody needed to know there's no more consecrated animals. There's no more paschal lamb. The temple was destroyed. That's the end of that. They didn't want to excommunicate Theodosius because he was a big Torah scholar and an extremely wealthy and prominent Jew in Rome. In other words, Theodosius was actually looking out for the interests of the Jewish community around the world, and especially in the Holy Land, through his influence in the city of Rome. And they wanted to keep him there and keep doing what he's doing. But they said, look, you can't do that. You have to understand the severity of what you've done. You can't do that. And if it was anyone else, we would have excommunicated them. So, don't do that. That concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 6 here in chapter 2. Mishnah 7. Now that we've discussed 3 leniencies of Rabban Gamliel, we go to 3 leniencies of Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah. Recall Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah, very distinguished scholar, who was, first of all, from a very distinguished family of Kohanim, priests, descendants of Aaron, Moses' brother, a very wealthy family, but more important than all of that, such a big Torah scholar that when he was 18 years old, he was appointed to be the head of the Sanhedrin after that unfortunate incident when Rabban Gamliel Sr., when Rabban Gamliel was deposed because he was a little bit too harsh, I believe it was to Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, and the other sages said, that's it, you're done, you can't be the leader anymore, you've abused authority. They elevated Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah at the age of 18 to be the head of the Sanhedrin. Eventually, Rabban Gamliel, apologized for the way he had been behaving, and they reinstated him. They couldn't lower Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah to no longer have that position of authority, so he actually shared authority with Rabban Gamliel. Like 3 Shabbats of the month, Rabban Gamliel would lecture, 1 Elazar ben Azaryah would lecture. But the point is that Elazar ben Azaryah, very distinguished member of one of the sages. So, there are 3 things that Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah permits and the rabbis prohibit. Number 1, his cow would go out on Shabbos with a decorative strap between its horns. Rabbi Elazar holds that such a strap is considered an ornament for the cow rather than a burden, whereas the sages view it as a burden. Why can't an animal go out with a burden on Shabbos? Because you can't work and your animal is not permitted to work on Shabbos. But if it's just an ornament, it's like you're dressing up your cow. That's the way Elazar saw it. He permitted it, even though the majority said no. Number 2, and one may comb an animal with a fine comb on a festival in order to remove ticks and dirt from its hair. The rabbis prohibit this due to a concern that he might thereby come to wound or bruise the animal, which is prohibited on Shabbos and on festivals. And number 3, one may grind pepper needed on the festival, even in a pepper mill, although this appears similar to weekday labor. Rabbi Yehuda says one may not comb an animal to remove ticks and dirt from its hair on a festival because this certainly creates a wound, but one may brush it with a wooden comb as its blunt teeth do not wound the animal. But the rabbis say one may not comb, one may not even brush. So we have 3 views. Elazar lets them comb, even with a fine comb. Yehuda lets people comb the animal only with a blunt comb. And the majority, the rabbis, said neither one on Shabbos. Where did the law end up? We'll see momentarily. The Gemara on this Mishnah. With regard to the Mishnah's statement that Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah's cow would go out on Shabbos with a strap between its horns. And the Gemara asks, is this to say that Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah had only one cow? But didn't Rav say, and some say that Rabbi Yehuda said that Rav said, Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah would tithe, give away a tenth, from his herds, equal to 13,000 calves each and every year, which means that he had 10 times that number of calves alone. Why then does the Mishnah speak of his cow? I mean, he was an extraordinarily wealthy person, right? I mean, if he was tithing 13,000 calves, it means that his herds had 130,000 calves per year. I mean, can you imagine how many cows that is? Maybe the sages are engaging in hyperbole. Maybe they're not. The point is, incredibly wealthy. Why would you speak about a cow? Rabbi Elazar's cow in the singular. And the Gemara answers that it is taught in the Tosefta the cow in question was not his cow. Rather, it was his neighbor's. And because he did not protest her conduct and tell her that it is prohibited to do so, the cow was called by his name to his discredit as if it were his. You know, and it's like, you can imagine this fabulously wealthy man living in a fabulously wealthy neighborhood, and then he goes, from his mansion down to, into the city where, going to the academy where the Torah scholars congregate to learn and teach Torah. And on the way, he passes his nearest neighbor. He probably has to walk a mile before he even reaches a neighbor. And it's like, a poor widow who has one cow, okay? And she really cares for her cow. And she dresses up her cow. It's probably her milk cow, but she cares for her cow. It's like her sole means of sustenance. And she has a nice little strap between its horns that she considers decorative. And she says, the sages told me I need to take this, I need to take the strap off. It's difficult for me. He said, leave the strap on the horns of the cow. It's an ornament. It's clearly an ornament. It's not a burden to the cow. The sages said, we decreed it's a burden to the cow. He said, I hold for her in my neighborhood where I have the authority that it's a decorative strap and not a burden. So they called it Rabbi Elazar's cow, but they did not like it, and it's a minority position, and that is not the law. It was taught in the Mishnah that Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah holds that one may comb an animal on a festival. The sages taught in a Beitzah what is considered combing and what is brushing. Combing is performed with a small tooth comb, and it is sure to make a wound because it's going to pull out some hair. It might even draw a little bit of blood from the animal. You can't do that on Shabbos or festival. Brushing is done with a large toothed comb, and it does not make a wound. And there are 3 disputes with regard to this matter. Rabbi Yehuda holds that an unintentional act, a permitted action from which an unintended prohibited labor ensues on Shabbos is prohibited. Okay, so we go back. This is a dispute that comes up over and over again, and we actually still talk about it today. So Rabbi Yehuda said that if you do something on Shabbos which would be permitted, but it is very likely to result in something that is prohibited, so then the original action is going to be prohibited. Rabbi Shimon says, unless it's guaranteed that unintended consequence, which would result in a prohibited labor, unless it's guaranteed that will happen, the original action is permitted, right? So the classic case of this is you have extra guests coming over, so you need more seats at your Shabbos table, so you're going to drag a bench across the floor, heavy bench across the floor. Now, it's a dirt floor, so you're going to make a furrow in the dirt, maybe. Maybe you can lift it enough so that you're not going to make that furrow. Maybe you can kind of drag it, right? So Rabbi Yehuda would say, it's very likely you're going to make a furrow, prohibited. Rabbi Shimon would say, look, you're trying to move the bench. Your purpose here is to move the bench so more people can sit at your Shabbos table. It might leave a furrow, it might not. Even if it leaves a furrow, you were not intending to create a furrow in the ground like a farmer creates a furrow in his field. So, since it is not guaranteed to happen, and it is certainly not your intention to create a furrow, I'm going to allow you to move the bench, and that is the law. The halacha follows Rabbi Shimon with respect to Shabbos. The unintended consequence, which produces a violation of a Shabbos prohibition, but it was not what you intended to do. You intended to do something that is permitted on its own, and it happens to cause this other unintended consequence, but it's not guaranteed to cause that. For Rabbi Yehuda, that it might cause the unintended consequence is enough to prohibit the labor entirely. For Rabbi Shimon, unless it's guaranteed to have that unintended consequence, he permits the original thing, like moving the bench. So that is that dispute between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda that's being alluded to here with respect to combing the hair of your animal on Shabbos or the festival. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda holds that an unintentional act, a permitted action from which an unintended prohibited labor ensues on Shabbos, is prohibited. The original act is prohibited. As in his opinion, it is prohibited to perform an action that in any way involves a prohibited labor on Shabbos, even if one has a permitted action in mind and does not intend to perform the labor in question, the one that's prohibited. Therefore, one may not comb an animal in a manner that might cause a wound, even unintentionally. However, he differentiates between the cases. Although he prohibits combing with a small tooth comb that makes a wound, he permits brushing with a large tooth comb that does not make a wound. And we do not issue a decree to prohibit brushing with a large tooth comb on account of that some people might forget and then also comb with the small tooth comb. And the rabbis also hold in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda with regard to the fundamental issue that an unintentional act is prohibited. However, they maintain that we do issue a decree on the large tooth comb because the person might forget and come to comb with the fine tooth comb. On the other hand, Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah holds in accordance with the minority opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who said that an unintentional act is permitted, right? The fact that you didn't intend to create a wound, unless it's guaranteed to cause a wound, you're intending to just brush the animal and remove ticks and other dirt from the coat of the animal. You're not intending to wound him. And since it's not guaranteed that you're going to wound him, Rabbi Shimon permits that, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah holds like Rabbi Shimon. And guess what? The law is according to that what was originally the minority opinion of Rabbi Shimon, as buttressed by Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah. They ended up winning the day on that question. Rava said that Rav Nachman said that Shmuel said, and some say that Rav Nachman said, this teaching himself, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, that an unintentional act is permitted on Shabbos, as Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah agrees with him. And that's where it came from. And Rava said to Rav Nachman, and let the master say the opposite, that the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, because the rabbis agree with him. And Rav Nachman said to him, fundamentally, I hold in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. I am merely adding another reason for doing so, which is that Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah agrees with them. And indeed, that is how eventually the halacha came to be established. Mishnah number 8. Now that we've been talking about a pepper mill, right? So Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah would allow you can grind spices on a festival for the food preparation. Can you grind pepper in a pepper mill? The rabbis say no because that's too similar to weekday work, and because it's so easy to grind pepper in a pepper mill as opposed to a mortar and pestle, you might come to grind more than what you need for the festival, and then it will come out that you are actually performing prohibited work because it's like you're grinding pepper for the future, beyond the festival. But Rabbi Elazar Azaryah would permit that. Now, the pepper mill that we just discussed in Mishnah number 7, now that we've mentioned the pepper mill, the Mishna says it is susceptible to tuma, to ritual impurity, because each of the 3 vessels of which it is comprised. It is susceptible to impurity because it is a wooden receptacle. It's susceptible to impurity because it is a metal vessel. And it is susceptible to impurity because it is a sieve. All 3 of these kinds of objects are susceptible to tuma, to ritual impurity. And all 3 are involved in a pepper mill. So for sure, the pepper mill can contract ritual impurity. Very short Gemara on that Mishnah. A sage taught the lower section of the mill is susceptible to impurity because it is viewed as a receptacle, since the ground pepper descends into it. The middle section is susceptible to impurity because it is a sieve, as it serves to filter the pepper. And finally, the upper part, in which the pepper is actually ground, is susceptible to impurity because it is a metal vessel. Although it is not a receptacle, it is nevertheless susceptible to impurity since it is made of metal. So if we were studying the laws of tahara and tuma, purity and impurity, ritual purity and ritual impurity, we could spend more time on those, but we're not doing that right now. Mishnah number 9, and I'm almost done, actually, because we're going to be finishing chapter 2, and I'm going to go to some questions and comments right now. But Mishnah number 9. A child's wagon with which he plays and upon which he also sits is susceptible to ritual impurity imparted by treading, walking on it. It is considered a fixed seat of the child, so that if the child is a zav, right, he has come into contact with these liquids that would make him a zav, and he sits on the wagon, it contracts the ritual impurity imparted by the treading of a zav. And this wagon may be handled on Shabbos. It is considered a vessel, and it may be dragged on the ground in Shabbos only upon cloth, a stone pavement, or the like, as otherwise it would create a furrow when dragged, and one would be liable due to the prohibited labor of plowing. And Rabbi Yehuda says, for this reason, no vessels may be dragged on the ground on Shabbos except for a wagon, which is permitted because its wheels do not make a furrow in the ground, but merely press the earth down. You're not dragging like the way you drag a plow through the ground. You know, a wagon that didn't have wheels, like a box with a cord that the kid is pulling it, he's going to make a furrow in the ground. Maybe. But Rabbi Shimon would permit this because that furrow is not guaranteed. Rabbi Yehuda would only allow it if it's wheels that don't make a furrow but simply press the earth down. Dragging vessels, what is the law? It is permitted to drag beds, chairs, and benches on Shabbos, whether they are large or small, provided that one does not intend to make a furrow in the ground. If they are so large that it is impossible for them not to make a furrow, then it would be prohibited. Even there, in that case, even Rabbi Shimon would agree with Rabbi Yehuda. One may be lenient if the entire town is paved with stones or some other hard material. A wagon that may be handled may be likewise dragged over any floor, even if the wagon is very large, as it does not make a furrow. And that concludes chapter 2 here in Tractate Beitzah, the 8th volume of the Talmud. All right, I think Nina probably had to go out. Let me see if she left any questions for me. Whew, man, I was so stressed out. The minutes were ticking by, trying to get live again, and just, I tried everything. Start, stop the computer, start, stop the camera, start, stop the phone. But I think it's because I've been using an older phone to control that camera, and tomorrow I'll be using the newer phone to do that, play music with the older phone. Okay, Nina had to go. So let me just see if there's a question I can scan. I love that. Where's Nina? Bill Eldridge is answering. Where's Nina? She went with the kids to the neighbors to the sukkah. Exactly right. Okay. Right? Bill Eldridge, I'm a little surprised that the majority don't follow Elazar on whether or not brushing the cow is a wounded thing. Did I read where the law came out on that? What the halacha on combing an animal? Where did the halacha end up? It is permitted to remove parasites from the skin of an animal on a festival, either by hand or with a wooden implement, even if it sometimes causes bruising. But one may not do so with an iron comb, which will necessarily tear off hairs. Right? So what they're saying is that the fine-tooth comb, even Rabbi Shimon would agree you can't do that, because a fine-tooth comb passing through the hide of an animal, it's going to pull out hairs. It's too likely to cause some kind of a little wound, even if it's not a visible wound. On Shabbos, it is prohibited to comb the animal at all. And the halakha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah, which is in accordance with Rav Nachman's ruling and the Rambam's understanding of this law. Right? So seems like Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah, and the law follows Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah, who follows Rabbi Shimon with respect to festivals, right? But on Shabbos, you can't comb the animal at all. That seems like we're following the rabbi's decree that we're not going to allow it to comb at all, because people will do it with the wooden comb, which wouldn't hurt the animal, but then people might get confused, and because they know they can comb it with the wooden comb, eventually they might make a mistake and comb it with the metal comb, and that was prohibited. That's what I've got for us today. I got to run and join the family. Thank you for bearing with me when we were late. Have a great evening. By the way, the greeting that we say to each other now during Hol HaMoed, these intermediate days of the festival of Sukkot, is Moadim L'Simcha. These are days of joy, the seasons of joy. And the Yiddish greeting, very simple, a good moed, right? That you should have intermediate days that are good days, good season. It's a good time. So, Moadim L'Simcha and a good moed.